Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, the radio flagship home of your Dallas Cowboys. Joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105.3 The Fan. He is also the co-host of the Dallas Cowboys pre- and post-game show on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. He's also a very proud former LSU Tiger, as you can see from the gear there. Some have called him the greatest deep snapper in the history of the program. It's Brian Broaddus. Brian, how you doing?
And that's the voice of Bobby Belt, who doesn't lie to you very often, but he lied to you right there. Bobby comes to you by way of the Sean and RJ and Bobby show, 5:30 to 10 every Monday through Friday. Bobby also the Cowboy Insider for 105.3 The Fan. He is also a host as we're on the Love of the Star and the Draft Show. And hopefully we get Bobby back this week. So
Yes.
Robert, they're making trades on you.
They did. Trades. So the last time we talked, they had made the trade for Stefan Gilmore that I think we all universally, and I made a couple calls around the league in the last couple days and heard some Stefan Gilmore feedback that before we jump into the Brandin Cooks trade, which is the breaking news of the day here, I did call around, ask some people just in general, hey, what are your thoughts on the Gilmore trade? I'm sure you did the same.
Yeah, I did.
Brian, a couple of things I heard back that were very interesting. A lot of people still think very good player, very good player. The question, obviously, being a 33-year-old corner is it eventually it just goes over a cliff. It's usually a sharp decline for corners, and so you just never know when that year is going to come. But as it stands now, he's still a good football player. So the two things universally I heard back were stunned it was only a 5th-round pick. A lot of people thought it would have been more than that. And the bigger issue that I heard consistently, there were a lot of people who were stunned there was no new money in the deal for Stefan Gilmore. And so universally, people were like, this is a great deal for Dallas. This is minimal compensation. His cap hit is already 14th among corners heading into next year or something like that. And there's no new money in it. There's no new guarantees, nothing like that for him. Universally, everybody I talked to around the league thought this is a huge win for Dallas.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. I was talking to some teams that had competed against Gilmore. I mean, the Cowboys were one of them, but I didn't talk to anybody with Dallas. So it was funny. I just started calling around to try and get a little bit different perspective. And the thing that my guys were saying is they said they really liked it. They felt like he could still play. He could play inside. He could play outside. He could match up with tight ends, with big wide receivers, smaller wide receivers. They felt like that he really prefers to play off and break on the ball is the kind of where his game is now. But very good instincts, very good ball skills, physical cover style if he has to play that way. They say we'll get an occasional holding or PI call, but good in run support, good tackler. Might have lost a little bit of a step, but still athletic and plays like a pro. And the number one thing they were all talking about was this guy is really, really good in the locker room. And so with all the things that I was talking about just then or what I just read, it seems like to me a very, very productive player that the Cowboys got for a 5th-round pick.
Yeah, so that was like I said, we've talked about the Gilmore trade, but that's some of the feedback we've gotten since we discussed it. Now on to the next trade the Cowboys have made, and I think they've made two really good ones now. They get Brandin Cooks for a 5th-rounder this year and a 6th-round pick next year. The Texans are going to take on $6 million of his $18 million salary, so the Cowboys are saddled with a $12 million salary this season, a cap hit that ultimately comes out to be 12.352 is his cap hit in 2023, which is really not that bad for what is still a pretty productive receiver. Brandin Cooks has had 6 career 1,000-yard receiving seasons. The most recent one came in 2021. 2022 was a little bit of a down year, just 700 yards roughly receiving, played in 13 games. Clearly was not happy there. Wanted to get out of Houston, was almost a Cowboy at the trade deadline. Cowboys thought they had a deal for him for a 3rd rounder, and Houston at the last second started trying to shop and came back and said, it'll take a second now. And Dallas said, we're not going to play with moving the goalposts. We're done. So the fact that Dallas gets away from that, it basically misses Cooks for the end of the season, and then a few months later comes back and they get him for a 5th and a 6th when they were initially willing to give up a 3rd, I think is huge, especially when you consider, Brian, I know generally the rule, right, is if you're a year out, consider it, a round later. So the value of a 6th rounder next year is considered a 7th this year.
Yeah.
So you basically get Cooks for a 5th and a 7th. I think this is great value for the Cowboys. $12 million hit for Brandin Cooks for a guy who's still, I think, very productive and will come in here motivated, ready to play, and reunites him with Robert Prince, his receivers coach in Houston in 2021.
Yeah, Bobby, you're absolutely right. And, Nick Cesario, the general manager from the Texans, he got a little greedy, got a little cute. And the Cowboys said, no, we're not willing to go that route. And so, they circle back around. There's been a lot of chatter about Cooks, a lot of chatter about Hopkins, a lot of chatter about Odell Beckham, but they went back to the guy that they felt like that they knew the best, and that was with Cooks. Felt like they're strong enough to make a trade last year. Didn't work out. Worked out this time around. I asked, again, some guys in the league about him. To a man, they were saying he could still play. One of the teams said we viewed him as a vertical threat with playmaking ability. He will stretch the field. The downside is they said, not physical and not a blocker. But, I'm sure that we're going to get into what he brings as a route runner. We talk about the vertical part of the game where he's done a really good job of being that guy, that down the field threat. But there are some other routes this guy can run and can execute pretty well.
Yeah, in fact, I was looking through his reception perception profile that Matt Harmon does, where he basically tracks the percentage of routes that guys are running on the route tree, how successful they are with them, and things like that. The 2022 data is not out yet, which obviously is a little bit of a unique situation, given, I think, what was going on in Houston and how happy or unhappy he was to be there. But when you look at his route combinations, he was really varied. Ran a lot of different stuff. He wasn't limited to just, he runs the same 2 or 3 routes. He ran just about everything. The most common routes he ran, though, Brian, 20% of the time he ran slants, 15% of the time he ran the 9 routes, had a lot of success in the flat, 90% success rate. That's one of the better rates in the league. So when you look at the way Robert Prince used him in 2021, a lot of 9 routes, but a lot of slants, and the success he has on the flats. And we know there's a lot of slant flat concepts and what McCarthy likes to do. Do you think this is just somebody who, hey, he really fits not only these changes that are probably coming to the route combinations on offense for the Cowboys, but what he also does is can really challenge defenses down the field? He is a vertical threat who can do other things, and has shown, at least from what I've seen when I was watching him last fall, thinking they were about to trade for him when I was doing some research on him, still seems like a guy who can also, despite his size, is a good contested catcher. I think Brandin Cooks is one of the better players you could probably come up with, maybe in league history, one of the better players of all time that doesn't have a Pro Bowl appearance. He's just a really strong football player who I think largely has gone underrated, and this seems like good value for the Cowboys and what they're trying to do.
No, I think you're absolutely right about the player, and you kind of always think about him being a vertical player, but you mentioned the slants, the flats, those routes that, he's able to execute and come away with, still a very, very productive receiver, a guy that defensive coordinators have to be concerned about because of his speed and his quickness. And I've seen him over the years put a lot of defensive backs in some bad situations. And I feel like that he can still do that. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, how motivated he'll be to be out of Houston to come to Dallas. The quarterback situation here, far better for him as far as, being able to run those routes and have some success and be able to finish. So I think it's just overall just a very, very positive get for the Cowboys. And they've done a really good job here, this offseason. I know we're very critical of them of not doing this or not doing that or sitting on their hands or, oh, it's too expensive, sign our own kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've done a really good job of taking, day 3 draft picks and going out and getting players, to the point where that you fill holes with the Van Der Esch, the Wilson, two of the more important signings that they felt like they had to have, got those done. They got a quarterback that has a 5-1 career record as a backup in games when your starters miss. That has to make them feel a lot better about where they're at. But to go out and take 5th round picks, 6th round picks, and manipulate them into players that can still play at a very high level, you have to give this front office credit for that. And I'm sure those players, Gilmore and Cooks, they come in, they're all very happy about being here, and you see very productive players because of that.
The aspect here, and we kind of briefly referenced it a few minutes ago. One of the aspects here that's probably a little underrated is the fact that Robert Prince did work with him in 2021. I'm guessing if the Cowboys make a deal like this, they're getting feedback from Robert Prince and wanting to know, is this a guy that can work here? Is this a guy that can execute what we need to? And the fact that they were willing to do it in the fall and they're willing to come back and revisit it now that we're into, the spring here, into the off season, makes you feel like he, in all likelihood, got the stamp of approval. There's a couple quotes I wanted to look at really quickly. 2021, Brandin Cooks talked about how with the Houston media said that you can tell with Robert Prince right off the bat that he's a coach that knows what he's talking about, really smart, great to have someone with his experience come in, help out. Robert Prince similarly talked glowingly about him during minicamp, said that Brandin Cooks shows the guys the right way to practice, great leader, not a talker. He's a doer, very engaged and willing to take coaching. When your top guy is willing to do that, it's easy for the other guys to follow. And then another thing, at the end of the 2021 season, a year that didn't go so great for the Texans, Robert Prince said that Brandin Cooks was the one in the locker room who stepped out and pointed out to everybody after the Jacksonville game that, hey, this is Davis Mills' first win as an NFL starter, and that made an impression on Robert Prince. Is like, hey, this is a guy who thinks of other people and their successes and things like that. So it sounds like there's a really good relationship there between the receivers coach and Brandin Cooks as well, which, if we're being honest, in the past, there have been times where the receivers coach and some
hasn't been good. Yeah.
Hasn't been good. And so it seems like a positive move in that direction, that not only you're going to get a motivated Brandin Cooks, he gets to end up where he wants to with a former teammate, I believe, in Stefan Gilmore, and a guy that he's friends with. What you're also getting here, it feels like, is a player who's going to be motivated to play for his position coach, and also can probably help communicate some things that Robert Prince would like to continue to teach in that room.
Yeah, and let's, if you go back and look at last year, look at the growth of CeeDee Lamb, and what he was, able to do. I'm sure that Robert Prince was working with him daily on things that he needed to improve with. But on the flip side, you could say, well, what happened with Michael Gallup? And I think it was more Michael Gallup than it was coaching or anything like that. I think that Michael Gallup was I think there were some struggles. I think there were some struggles with the injury. I think there were some struggles with some of the stuff off the field that he was dealing with, that, hopefully he can put all that stuff behind him and be the type of player that we all have seen him be before. But having Gallup, Cooks, Lamb, I haven't given up on Jalen Tolbert at all. I think he came in and I think it's like he got hit upside the head with a shovel.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real eye-opening experience for him. And I think the pressure got to him a little bit. I think the pressure got to him of, you saw him in some drills and stuff, body catching the ball. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I watched South Alabama film and saw him hand snatching balls, going up and getting balls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll feel more comfortable. But that wide receiver room, I think, got a little bit better today. And we'll see if they figure out the wide receiver draft, if they add another one, because I think it's going to be difficult. I think there's some good players. I just don't know if what direction some of these teams are going to go with the shorter slider, slight. I say slider, or with with the weight wise slight built receivers. If people can figure that out, the teams that figure out about how these short, slight wide receivers are going to pan out, that'll be the team that has a pretty good draft when it comes to the wide receiver group, because there's a lot of question marks over on that side. And I feel like the Cowboys really helped themselves by adding a veteran like Brandin Cooks, who they know, they've seen, and now it takes a lot of the guesswork of having to maybe force something in the draft with a wide receiver.
I think that there's a I think there's a slim chance the best player on their board at 26 is going to be a running back. I think that the better running backs will go ahead of them. And then I would just think that they'd have somebody on their board who's a higher graded player than a running back there. They've addressed receiver, at least in the interim. They're going to hope that Michael Gallup and Jalen Tolbert find their way again. We know they've addressed corner now, which was one of their big needs. Do the moves we've seen, these contingencies they put in place to allow themselves to go BPA, best pick available.
Right.
Do you think all these moves has increased the odds that tight end could be the pick at 26?
Well, yeah, I need somebody to explain to me what they're going to do with Tyron Smith. If somebody will explain to me that Tyron Smith is going to play left tackle, then I think that answers some questions about what I might do at guard. But will the best player available, the BPA that you're talking about, could it be a guard? And would they do that knowing that maybe Tyron Smith has one more year and they want to put Tyler Smith back at left guard? Me personally, I want to see Tyler Smith play left tackle. I just do. And I wonder if Tyler Smith is going to play left tackle and then we see Tyron Smith play right tackle until they get Steele back completely healthy and ready to go. I think there's still a lot of questions over there. I don't know that the best player is going to be a guard on their board, a tight end, a corner, or a running back. I think there's a lot of options. And that's the great thing about the type of offseason that they've had. Signing their own, making a couple of trades. They've left it open to where it really is whatever player has a grade of a 118 or a 117 or something like that first round grade, that's going to be, at least they'll have that opportunity to take that guy and feel really good about it.
Brandin Cooks here. One last note before we transition over. I just find this one interesting. We talk about how he's never made a Pro Bowl in his career. He has 4 seasons, Brian,
1,000 yards.
He has 6 seasons of 1,000 yards. He has 4 seasons of at least 75 receptions and 1,100 receiving yards.
Yeah.
That is the most 4 seasons without being named to a Pro Bowl. That's the most in NFL history. I'm not talking about, you get a guy like, somebody else who's on that list, for instance, Amari Cooper has 2 of those seasons. He's been named to a Pro Bowl before. So this isn't just players included who have made or who have never made Pro Bowls. This is putting up that kind of production and not getting a Pro Bowl bid from that production. Brandin Cooks has the most such seasons in NFL history.
I kind of feel like that Brandin Cooks is one of those guys. I think he now becomes one of the most traded players in NFL history.
Yes.
4 times. So I think that's kind of been, when people think of Brandin Cooks, they think of a very talented receiver, traded often for first round picks, one of those types of guys. But I think the thing is, why can't he stay with one team for any length of time? So maybe that's where people feel more about him than they do, that him be deserving Pro Bowl nods and things like that.
He's been traded for a first-round pick a couple different times. So there are people who like him. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, we have not had a chance to talk since some other news came down. And I'll be honest, if it was if this was a couple of years ago, or if this was an instance where this player was as significant as he was at one point, maybe we would have talked about it sooner. But I don't know. I didn't know that there was a huge rush. Ezekiel Elliott is no longer a Dallas Cowboy, Brian. They choose to post June 1 release him, and he is now on the market. And, in search of a job. The Cowboys could not come to an agreement on a pay structure and a amount of playing time that made sense for both parties. So he has moved on. Your initial thoughts on the release of Ezekiel Elliott and what the Cowboys do moving forward?
Well, we all kind of felt like that even before the Senior Bowl, like postseason, after the playoff game, we all remember Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones at Mobile, Alabama, and Jerry talking about, well, I want to keep Zeke and I want to keep Tyron. I want to keep, and then you and I had some shows where we're like, well, that doesn't seem very realistic right now. And then it was about, okay, well, we need to have those meetings before we go to the combine and kind of figure things out.
Yep.
And they went and had their meetings and they figured it out. They figured out that they had to move on from Ezekiel Elliott. And, this is one of those things. And I was on 105.3 The Fan the other day, whether you like Ezekiel Elliott or not. And if one of the reasons why you don't like him is because you felt like he made too much money for the position and how he played, that's not his fault. The Cowboys are the ones, the front office are the ones that paid him the money. Now, Ezekiel Elliott initially, if you want to say he's the one, and maybe I'm saying it's the wrong way, but he saved Dak Prescott's first 2 years in the NFL. He really did. That when you look at his rookie year after, I mean, Ezekiel playing at a very high level for several years, it took a lot of pressure off Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak Prescott didn't have to be the entire offense's rookie. We've seen so many rookie quarterbacks get thrown in that situation and just drowned. And I think Ezekiel Elliott, he suffered for it. He suffered for it for the number of carries he got. He suffered because he wouldn't miss games. He suffered because he played through injury, So say what you want about Ezekiel Elliott. I feel like the money he got is the money he earned for what he did. Now, was it, at the time too much? No, not then. But now, yeah, it is. So you kind of feel like, okay, Ezekiel, let me tell you this, Bobby. Ezekiel Elliott's next gig needs to be where he splits time with another running back.
Yep.
Because he's figured out by him carrying the entire load, it's not gonna go good for him. It's just he's had too many carries already. So I think he saw what would happen with him and Pollard. They split time. He was able to stay fresher, through games. The production wasn't there, but I tell you what, the times they handed him the ball in 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 and things like that, he was fine. But you knew it was going to come to an end just because the amount of money, and the Cowboys were the ones that signed him to that contract. The people say, well, he held out. Well, yeah, he held out, but what happened? Cowboys caved and gave him the money. Stephen Jones, I was standing right there in the Indianapolis in a ballroom at the Marriott when he was talking about where Ezekiel Elliott's money stood. And he mentioned the name Todd Gurley. At the time, Todd Gurley was the highest paid running back in the league with the Rams. And Stephen Jones in front of me, Todd Archer, John Machota, Calvin Watkins, Clarence Hill, Jane Slater, we all standing there watching as Stephen Jones said that. He put himself in that corner. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's what they thought of the player. And so I kind of feel like now that, the Cowboys like, okay, we gave you this money and you earned it, but it's too much now. And they had to make that decision. And in fact, that They did. And guy had a hell of a career in Dallas. He really, really did. You look, like I say, you look at what he was able to do, and I give him full credit for allowing Dak Prescott to at least have a chance to develop the first 2 or 3 years of his career.
Okay, my turn, Brian. Is it my turn to get yelled at now? Because I'm going to have some people yell at me. I had people yelling at me last week when I talked about Ezekiel Elliott. Here's how I view.
So I was the good cop. Now you're going to be the bad cop?
Yeah. Here's how I view Ezekiel Elliott's time in Dallas. The first year he was here, he was one of the probably 5 to 10 best players in football, period, that year. He was great. He was incredible. 2017, I didn't think he was very good. 2018, he was good again, and that was the last time we saw good football out of him. Every moment that he played on that contract, or every moment after the extension, because some of it was part of the rookie deal, every moment after that extension got done, he was playing beneath what he had told the Cowboys he was worth. And yeah, the Cowboys got the deal done. That's on them. Yeah. But when I think of Ezekiel Elliott, I think, boy, when he was a good football player, he was a pain in the ass for them off the field. Consistently.
Yeah.
And as soon as that ended and the maturation came, he was a pain in the ass for them on the field because he wasn't very good. And so I have less of a time feeling more glowingly about it because I'm like, man, whether it was off the field or on the field, you were not getting what you totally needed from him at any point in the 7 years he was here. When he was on the field, there was usually something off the field. As soon as off the field was taken care of, on the field, he wasn't very good. And I think that when you look back at that, I just say it was well past time. I was not one who thought they should have given him the contract extension. But, man, you look at his yards per game from rookie year down, Brian.
I know. I know,
108.7, 98.3, 95.6, 84.8, 65.3, 58.9, 50, a regression every year of his career.
Sure.
And so to me, I just look at it and go, I don't look back on it fondly so much as I have some bitterness that why did it take this long to correct this mistake? You guys let yourself sit on this contract
because they handed him the ball like a million times, and
they shouldn't have.
Yeah, okay, but that's okay. Do you not think him? Okay, so are you saying that I'm wrong that he helped with the early development with Dak?
No. And like I said, I think he was.
I mean, that he took the pressure off Dak having to carry the offense by himself.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that he was, like I said, he was really, really good. The first several years, or the first year, that first year he was here, he was great.
The suspension and all that was bad. That set all that headache that happened, and all that, man. He was never convicted of anything. I mean, it was like a lady, if you go back in the court, in an Ohio court, they didn't convict him of anything.
Here's
the league suspended him, and he's on, he's off, he's on, he's off. And I mean, hey, did he put himself in some bad situations? Yeah. Absolutely he did. And was he very good at the end? No. But I think by his demise, it allowed Tony Pollard to get more opportunity. They would have kept playing. They would have kept playing Zeke, if they could. But you're right. They started to see the things you did. That, hey, the yards per carry are down. Breaking tackles is down. All those things. He was becoming a declining player. But they also ran him into the ground. Mike McCarthy said it on one of those episodes of Hard Knocks. Stephen Jones is standing there and he goes, "Gosh, you guys have given him the ball a lot."
Lot.
And Stephen kind of goes, yeah. Like he was embarrassed,
So Tony Pollard, I made this reference this week on 105 Through the Fan when I was just looking through some of the numbers, trying to compare Tony Pollard's usage to Zeke's. When you look at the fact that Tony Pollard has played 62 games, Brian, and over those 62 games, he has 631 touches. Ezekiel Elliott got his 632nd touch in the 26th game of his career. 26 games, and he was already at Tony Pollard's number. And in fact, here's one of the things that Pollard's been in the league for 4 years. Zeke's been in it for 7. Over the next 3 years, if Tony Pollard gets 500 touches a year, he still will trail Zeke through 7 years by 55 touches.
Jason Garrett ran him into the ground.
They did, absolutely. And that's why what I'm hoping they've learned from this is don't ever pay somebody that you use them up that much. Like I think they're still willing to at least investigate what Pollard might be able to do because they've sort of kept him in bubble wrap. And Memphis didn't use him a ton. I mean, he's never been a workhorse throughout his career. Zeke was used as a workhorse to the point that, Brian, let's see, what is it? The 15 longest touchdowns of Ezekiel Elliott's career all came on his rookie deal.
Yeah.
All of them. That is wild. Now, understand me when I say that. When I say they all came on his rookie deal, like there was one in 2019, which was after he got the extension, but that was still on the rookie contract. The extension years hadn't kicked in yet. Mm-hmm. So just to me, I look at it as it's well past time. I don't really feel like I know some people said you're being super disrespectful. That you can't be disrespectful.
No, you're not being disrespectful.
The guy got his money, and it was time. That's all of it.
It absolutely was time. The fact that Jerry Jones even thought about bringing it back at the Senior Bowl, that even a guy like me that is apologizing for Zeke right now I was surprised he said that.
Now, one more note here before we move on to the mailbag, because you already made reference, I know, to the Tyron Smith situation. And since we last talked, Tyron Smith has gotten a reworked deal from the Cowboys. So it was funny when it was first reported, the language used was, I believe the first person reported was Tom Pelissero, and he said restructure. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, if this is a restructure, there's a problem because that means they're not taking a pay cut. They're just doing accounting tricks. And then, of course, Todd Archer from ESPN comes out with the report of, no, this is a reworking, not a restructure. It's a reworking. Yeah. Which basically turns a good portion of his salary into incentives for playtime and playoff wins and things like that. So Tyron Smith's contract, his cap hit ultimately frees up $9.6 million with the change in his contract structure. His deal now is a 1-year, $6 million deal. He can make up to $17 million with a lot of it in playtime bonuses. So he gets $1 million if he plays in 50% of the snaps for the year. If he plays in 55% of the snaps, he gets another million. 60, another million. And it just goes up in these increments of 5%. He gets another million all the way up to 90%. That to me, Brian, as we talk about what they're going to do, that to me sounds like their plan is for him to be starting in some capacity and that they're covering themselves on, we don't want to pay you if you're not going to start for us and you get hurt. And so to me, I think it still sounds like Tyron Smith and Tyler Smith is the left side of the offensive line next year.
Yeah, that's what that's the questions I have. And I want to know where if you could tell me where Tyron Smith is going to play, I could tell you where Tyler Smith is going to play,
Yep.
If you could tell me those things. And, the more I'm digging in on the draft, some of those names, the guard class, I think has gotten a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I don't feel particularly great about taking one at 26, but second, third round kind of grades, absolutely. If that's something that you feel like you need to do, but I'm not interested in grabbing one at 26 because I kind of feel like the first, second, third guys are kind of very similar type of players, right, to me. So I'm not interested. I might go a different direction at 26. I know a lot of people had, always like these mock drafts we look at. It's always Torrance from Florida as the guy. I don't think you have to pick Torrance at 26. I think you could grab a guy second, third, fourth round that could do the job just as well.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can get it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, let's move on now to our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. We're going to turn things over to our dear sweet listeners for their questions. Let them control the segment now. Let's go to a first-time listener. Somebody says this is going to be their first time listening to the podcast, Frankie J. And Frankie wants to know who is currently the better wide receiver, Michael Gallup or Brandin Cooks. And Brian, I don't know about you. I feel 100% confident saying that at this moment, Brandin Cooks is a better player than Michael Gallup.
Yeah, I think so too. And hopefully Michael, again, put all the things behind him, the knee and the off the field stuff that he was dealing with. And hopefully he's got that all squared away. He could come into camp, the OTAs mini camp, fresh ideas, fresh attitude, and be the type of player. But you're right. Cooks right now is a better player.
Next question here from Brett Logan. He says, I feel Dallas still needs to address the linebacker position in free agency or in the draft in the first 3 rounds. Do you think Dallas will address linebacker early in the draft or go with a veteran free agent or both? Typically, as we've seen the Cowboys will do, they a lot of times will make some sort of veteran addition to just cover themselves, and then they just draft as they see fit. What kind of a linebacker might be out there on the market? I don't know. I would
Bobby Wagner's out there, but I don't think they're going to do Bobby Wagner.
Yeah,
I think that's very doubtful on Bobby Wagner. That's just my gut feeling on. And I'm going to give a date, March 19th. That's my gut feeling that I don't think they're going to do anything with Bobby Wagner.
And so if that's the case and they do go to the draft, and look, now that they've covered themselves on a few different areas, corner, receiver, or they've got some contingencies in place, it may give them some flexibility to take a linebacker somewhere in the top 100. If they say, hey, this is the best player left and we've got needs here at linebacker, do you think they address linebacker somewhere in the first 3 rounds, or do you think they say, look, we're going to really count on Damone Clark and Leighton Vander Esch to be our guys?
I think they'd like to count on those guys, but Sanders from Arkansas, Simpson from Clemson, Campbell from Iowa, kind of like guys I have in that second round type of group.
Now, Simpson and Sanders will not be in the second round, even though that's where you have them graded. I think
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like we'll say, that's where I have them graded, but you never know how the league will see them. The league might have them higher than that. So, if you back up in the draft, maybe those are guys. Campbell, I mentioned from Iowa. Henley, I think is a really, really good player.
I like Henley from Washington State.
Washington State. I mean, this cat I think he is really, 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 really good. I like we talked about Williams from Tulane, a little bit of a smaller guy. Overshown from Texas is a guy that, that people have talked about a little bit. He's the opposite of Williams. I mean, he's a physical freak looking player out of Texas. But if you gave me a shot at a guy, I would take Henley, as I mentioned, in a heartbeat from Washington State. I think there's something about his game. I don't ever see him coming off the field. I can see him covering. I see him the way he runs, sideline to sideline. He's a downhill player. He tackles really, really well. He can cover. I think that's one of those guys. When he gets picked on draft day, whether it's by the Cowboys or somebody else, when we're working the draft those 3 days, I'm going to give that team a lot of credit for knowing what they're doing with him.
Now, if we look at a veteran free agent, we know that Dan Quinn has pulled in some of his guys before. Should we keep an eye maybe on Deion Jones? He's a free agent. He's not the same player he once was, but
it's kind of weird with Deion Jones. I had somebody, I think I don't, man, because I asked somebody about him from an outside scout, a couple outside scouts. And I'm like, hey, is there something going on with Deion Jones and Dan? And it kind of felt like that they weren't on the same page on some stuff.
Yep.
Now, that was a while back. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, and I know somebody's going to quote me on this. So.
Nah. We're just kicking around.
This is just an idea that maybe Dan and Jones just didn't see eye to eye on some stuff, and things might have changed. I mean, it's been a year now. 2 years on that. So keep an eye on it, but know that if they don't do that, it maybe something's there between player and coach.
Next question here from Stan Spencer. With some of these needs being met now, we were just talking about how it may change up the draft plans a little bit, but with needs being met, is there a better chance of going after Bijan Robinson in the first round, even if it means going up to get him? So maybe you go up 6 spots and give up a second or something like that.
Don't see that.
You're already shaking your head no.
No. I don't think Dallas to me is going to sit there and draft. They're just going to sit there and let the board come to them. They've done it in the past. I mean, it's moving up is something that, it's always a possibility, but I just don't see them moving up for a running back. To me, I look at Robinson from Texas. I look at Gibbs from Alabama. I'm just starting to see, Bobby. I think I've done 15. I think I've done 15 running backs. Evaluate them, and whether it's Robinson and Gibbs, A-Chain from Texas A&M, Charbonneau from UCLA. I love McIntosh from Georgia, Rashawn Johnson from Texas, Evans from Ole Miss, Spears from Tulane, Bigsby from Auburn, Gray from Oklahoma, Kendre Miller TCU, Tucker from Illinois. I mean, that I just listed, like, any one of those guys I listed, I'd love to have. I just love to have. And I don't think it, you plug them in, and I went all the way down to the 5th round for you right there. I went, it's just a really, really deep draft. And so I don't see them going up, but if one of them were to fall at a certain spot, I would not be surprised at all that they grab one.
Question here from Chris Hodnett. Given the state of the tight end market, is there a chance Dallas re-signs Dalton Schultz?
Everybody's coming around now. I'm asking those questions. I've asked on a couple different platforms, whether it's DallasCowboys.com, Draft Show, Cowboys Break, even my own show. And, everybody's kind of like, I don't know. I want to think that probably the water is under the bridge on that one. I want to think that maybe that with Dalton Schultz didn't end the way that Dalton Schultz thought it should have ended. The way, I think the Cowboys are looking at it as, you know what, that's fine. Go ahead and go move on. I should never say never, but I just feel like that's now kind of water under the bridge for Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, I think that I believe that he would be ready to, and he loves Dak Prescott. I think he loves his teammates. I think he's got really good chemistry, but I think Dalton feels like if he needs to go out there and do a 1-year prove it deal or just kind of go out there and do something different, I don't think he wants to do that with Dallas after they franchised him and then limited his usage. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported on Sunday on SportsCenter, said that there are a lot of people who like Dalton Schultz right now, and the complicating factor is nobody's really wanting to spend big money on the position. Yeah. So even though he's somebody,
it's because and like you say,
well, I mean, what do we want to spend? Now, one of the things he brought up, because you could go sign a 1-year deal, reset your market, go back out there next year. He brought up an interesting name, Brian. What about he goes to Cincinnati, plays with Burrow, get his numbers up for a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we Hayden Hurst, right? In Hayden Hurst, I mean, look what, it's super. That's the thing about Joe. Joe gets you the ball. I there's, like I say, there's 2 positions that that I feel like these guys that are on the street right now, if you're a tight end or you're a running back, you better sign right now if you can. Don't be waiting around, because what's going to happen is in 2 weeks, these pro days are going to be done. And all these scouts are going to come back to their team's headquarters, and they're going to start working on the draft. And they're not going to worry about free agency anymore. And they're going to have 15 names at tight end, and they're going to have 15 names at running back that people are going to like, well, Dalton Schultz. Oh, okay. Well, I really do like this kid Strange from Penn State. I really think he's a really good player. Oh, how about this Kuntz from Old Dominion. I kind of like him. I like him. How about Kuntz?
Oh, Kuntz. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's you know what I said.
Yeah,
Bobby, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. But Kuntz, how about Allen from Clemson? You know, Latu from Alabama. I just named off 4 or 5 fourth, 5th round guys. You know, that's not to mention Schoonmaker from Michigan, Kraft from South Dakota State, Laporta from Iowa, all 3rd round guys. All right, here we go. They're still, you know, how about Kincaid, Musgrave, Washington? These are all really good players. You know, that's what I'm saying. These teams are going to go back in their rooms and they're not going to have time for expending a bunch of money on a Dalton Schultz or an Ezekiel Elliott. Those guys had better get in camps as soon as they can. The money's going to dry up because the teams are going to say we can just draft these guys.
That does it for us here on the Love of the Star podcast. We'll be back with you guys 2 more times this week, hopefully with some more updates on what the Cowboys are planning to do and some additional draft conversation for you. Until next time, we will talk to you guys later.